What she did this, she also applied the whole concept to whole body exercise, and again found similar results. Now this study took it a bit further. That was there are some novel findings in here that we didn't know before. Whilst this sort of steady state and non-steady state was confirmed here, what they also found was, because they performed muscle biopsies, they found that critical power positively correlated with type 1 muscle fiber and inversely correlated with type 2 muscle fibers, but W prime didn't. There was no correlation between W prime and respective muscle fiber types. The study also highlighted that larger athletes with large W prime values have at end test, they usually provide also higher levels of end lactate, blood lactate and creatine, which are of course indices of substrate level phosphorylation. The fourth finding that this study also highlighted is when we equal workload and we compare all tests versus constant work rate test, that the metabolic perturbation in all our tests is greater than when we compare it to a constant equal work, constant load work rate test. So let's move on here. This is sort of a bit of a physiology behind it. How do we model critical power? What we usually do is we perform, that is the old method, we perform 3 to 5, depending how many tests we're doing, time to exhaustion trials. There are various models out there, and what we find here, and when we plot this, when we plot power over time, that the critical power is the asymptote of the hyperbolic curve here, whilst any rectangular under the curve illustrates W prime. So no matter where I set this rectangular underneath, the size of W prime is of a fixed nature. The beauty of this model is I've got power here, so it's very understandable for the user, and I've got time, power on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. However, this is not necessarily very user-friendly for coaches in sort of them adopting this model, but it allows us to, because it attracts a high research intensity, it allows us to really predict performances along the curve. So we can just put this into an Excel file, and we can predict 60 minutes performance as well as, for example, 3 minutes or below performances. And Christoph will demonstrate this model later in practice. We can also formulate the critical power model linearly, and here what we have is the work on the y-axis and the time of the x-axis. This becomes somewhat more user-friendly because it is linear, just translated into it. However, again, for the coaches, and we work very applied here, talking about work is not necessarily the best language to communicate with coaches. So consequently, there's also the inverse time model. So we have got 3 classic models here. There are more than these out there. However, these are the classic ones. And here, the beauty here is we got, again, power on the y-axis, very understandable for everybody. And we have got just 1 divided by time, so the inverse time model here on the x-axis. And the current literature usually, that's one limitation at the moment, is it's quite interesting when you look at it, they sometimes choose the model of best fit. So they look into the data set and decide, okay, which of those models is the one that best fits my research questions. And I would like to raise a word of caution here, because I think this is not about the best model of fit. It should be, we should work towards actually, and I'll come back to this towards the end of the presentation, a model that is applied by everybody, so we know that the data is really comparable. Because when we calculate those values, we get somewhat slightly different results out of it. However, when we summarize it, we can use all of those models. They can become very handy if we want to, for example, in research, determine how much time to exhaustion at a severe work rate. We can determine either the power or the time at which we want somebody to be at exhaustion. And some of the research literature, of course, uses those things, saying we wanted to have our athletes exhausted within 6 minutes. or we use this particular power to be exhausted in a given time. It also allows us then to calculate, given if we know W prime and critical power for a given amount of work done or distance covered, how fast an athlete can perform. Now there is, interestingly in running, there's currently out there the sub-2 approach. So if it's still going on, which I hope during the Olympic Games this summer in a few weeks, there's a